Well, thank you again for joining us today. We're going to have an incredible day today. I'm so excited to have Shilo Harris with us. You're going to hear more about his story in just a moment, but Shilo's a retired staff sergeant from the U.S. Army. He's got an incredible testimony of God's provision and blessing, how God has worked through a horrible circumstance in his life. But I want to let you know, he's going to have books available in our lobby here in Indiana that you can purchase, and every book is signed, and he doesn't have time to personalize those, but he will be available for just a little bit after our service today, be able to take pictures or say hi, give you greetings before he needs to go to the airport, and so he will be available following this. But if you would like to register, we're going to be giving away a number of signed books here in Indiana, in Blairsville, and at Johnstown, at Grace Church as well. And if you'd like to register for those, here's how you do it. You simply text Shilo, S-H-I-L-O, to the number 94,000. And when you do that, you can follow the prompts. And the last thing you have to do is let us know which campus you're associated with. And if you don't do that, then you're not actually registering. But register, we're gonna be giving those books away. And so even if you purchase a book, you're gonna get a free copy as well that you'll be able to give away or bless somebody else with. So if you would, I would love for you to take part in that. So get signed up, get registered right now. With no further ado, I want you to do me a favor and please welcome with me to the platform, Staff Sergeant Harris. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
So good to see you.
I got something for you.
Yeah.
So I waited for this one, to give this one to you, but this is my challenge coin. And for those of you that see, we have the Purple Heart on it and the cross sabers for me being a Cav guy.
I love it.
And then just a little thing on the back, a little mantra. But,
thank you so much.
Anyway, no, man, thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, it's our pleasure. It's our pleasure.
To be here. Thank y'all again for that welcome.
Well, thank you for joining us this weekend. It's been so good. And this is the fourth. And so we have worn you out while you've been here. We've wrung the life out of you, but I appreciate you letting us introduce you to so many people and letting so many people hear your story and just what God's done in your life. So thank you for being here. Well,
I want you to know it's been really good for me. I know that we hadn't really talked about this, but, COVID affected me as well. And, I lost a lot of my work. So, as I've been getting back out there speaking and everything, these 4 events, I'm so happy that we did this interview style because I feel like the audience has gotten so much good context. Because you are really good at drawing that information out. I asked him if he had his own podcast through the church, and he was like, "Well, I've been told I'm a great interviewer." And I was like, "That's what your plaque on your desk should say: greatest interviewer ever."
Kind of a big deal. I have many leather-bound books, so.
But it's been great. It's been really good for me too because, I'm getting to tap into parts of my story that I hadn't really tapped into in a long time. So
that's awesome.
This has been great for me.
Well, good. Well, thank you for joining us today. If you don't mind, let's just jump in. And if people aren't familiar with your story, they might not realize you're a Texan boy, born and bred, but you're from West Texas. And so tell us a little bit about what life was like growing up in West Texas and some of your experiences out there.
Well, me being a storyteller, I'm going to tell it in story form.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I grew up in West Texas around Odessa, Midland. Anybody familiar? If you don't, that's okay. But I see there's a few of you. It's real deserty out there. Yeah. I mean, it really is. I guess it was great preparation for me to end up in Iraq. Not that bad, but oil field country. And anyway, so being from that area, I get invited home quite a bit for one thing or another. But one of the events that I was going out there, it was an outdoor event. And as a burn survivor, I have a hard time regulating my body temperature, which is why we have the fan. And, it's just, I can overheat really easy. Well, it is West Texas, and it is a desert. I was driving out there, had my cowboy boots on, had my belt buckle, but I didn't have a hat. So I decided, hey, I'm going to get a hat for a couple of reasons. One, it'll help keep the sun off of me while I'm at this event. And the other thing is, I wanted to complete the outfit, right? You know what I mean? So I went to the Western Wear store, and I told the girl, I said, hey, I don't even know what size my head is. So let's start small, work our way up. Well, she did what I asked. She brought over a couple of hats. The first hat that she handed me was like a child's hat. It had the elastic band in it, and it just barely sat on the crown of my head. Well, clearly that one wasn't it. Right. I was pulling it off. And the other hat she had in her hand, and as I was pulling that other one off, and I think she figured she could just size me up, right? So she set that other hat up there and popped it down. Well, when she did, both my ears popped off. They popped off and they hit the floor and they're bouncing around. Man, I thought I'd get more laughs out of that one. I think the last group, I just pulled my ears off for you guys. And look, I'm wearing one of my Spock ears too. I was hoping it was better reception for when we're having conversations like this, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Or I could just hand it over.
It's like a walkie-talkie. Yeah.
Like a walkie-talkie.
Yeah.
Ooh, I wonder if they can do like an extended antenna thing. So anyway,
So how
no
did she
kidding though.
respond?
I know, right?
What'd she do?
So both my ears popped off. They hit the floor, and I'm scrambling around to get them. And you know, the other kicker on this is I hadn't had my ears very long. You know, I'd only had them a couple of weeks. And I mean, like this, I'm really aerodynamic, just so y'all know. I mean, I'm like cut through the wind. Well, both my ears popped off, and I'm so embarrassed. I didn't even know what to say. I mean, what do you say?
Yeah.
And I'm picking up my ears, and I look up, and the little girl, I scared her to pieces. She was like, you know, I didn't mean to. I said the first thing that came to mind. I was like, bet that happens a lot, huh? I don't even think she said anything. And I could see that mine and her relationship was coming to an end. So I decided to let her down easy. I was like, you know, I'll just look around, you know, shop around. It was like a cartoon character, I swear. When she took off, it's like you can see the little dust trail behind her, like, you know. She probably didn't even smoke. She probably went out in the back and was like, I broke that poor guy. I should have had a shirt that says, you break it, you bride, you know. Well, I get out of my event and I'm telling my buddies about it. One of them's a Baptist preacher and the other one's a Vietnam veteran. And anyway, I'm telling them, and I figured it'd be the veteran poking fun at me, you know, because we got dark sense of humor. Well, the veteran was the one patting me on the back. Yeah, which was cool. But the Baptist preacher looks at me and he goes, dude, you could have got a free hat. I was like, what? He said, when your ears fell off, you should have went, ah! Got enough attention, I might have got a whole new outfit, right? But yeah, that's my West Texas story. But you know, growing up out there, you know, it really was a pretty wild West in a lot of ways. And I didn't necessarily have a big church structure. You know, my grandfather and I, we went to church every now and then. My father, you know, he didn't do a lot of church stuff, but he was an oil field guy. And so one thing I didn't do was I was raised in a bar.
Yeah.
I mean, we spent a lot of time in the bar because out there in West Texas back in those days, that's where you got a job. You know, I mean, really, people would pull up in one of those, you know, crew trucks and be like, we need 3 hands. Well, people would be stumbling out of the bar to go to work. You know, but a lot of them would just be out there hanging out and waiting for, hopefully, a job to come through that they could jump on. But it's pretty Wild West. But it was a good raising.
So, obviously, you served in the military, but did that come pretty naturally for you? Was that something that was part of your family and your family experience?
Yeah, you know, I came from a family of veterans. My father and my grandfather both served in the military. And my father, he taught me how to be tough. You know, he's a Vietnam veteran. And as we all know, the Vietnam veterans paid a huge price, you know, for all of our veterans. Speaking of that, and I've been doing this every show, and just before I even have to do it, I'm going to tell you, if you're a veteran, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. Now, the reason I'm saying this early is because the last couple of shows, the last couple of services that we had, I'd ask for veterans to raise their hand, and then I'd meet them out there, and some of them wouldn't raise their hand during the service. So I'm going to ask you, if you would, if you're a veteran, please raise your hand. And thank you so very much for your service. Thank you. Now, the reason that, you know, I wanted to say it the way that I did is because for, you know, a lot of us that served in uniform, the sacrifice and the things that we've witnessed, you know, it's challenging. And, you know, and we don't always want that recognition. You know, it's not about the medals and the ribbons. It's not about, you know, being called hero. We serve because we're in service. You know, it's just like Pastor Mel. He's up here because he's in service of God. He's in service of you. And, you know, and for us that served in uniform, we felt the same way, except our service was on the battlefield. And, you know, and I know that God was there with me. And for me to be able to share my story with all of you guys is very powerful. And getting to meet other veterans as well is very powerful. But as I said, you know, I came from a family of veterans. My grandfather, World War II. I got a lot of input from him from the good side of the military. And he was just so influential. And he taught me a lot of strength and I don't know how to push through things. But like I said, my dad, he was tough. Our backyard looked like an obstacle course. So it was a perfect fit for me to end up in the military.
Yeah. So you graduate high school and you're intending on joining the military. Tell us what happens.
I didn't plan on doing anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I had this influence, and it felt like I'd been trained for it my whole life. I graduated high school, and, I kind of fiddled around and trained, went to Abilene, a little bigger city. And, I was like, what, I think I'm ready to join the military. I went, and all those little things. And I want to say this, specifically to our younger generation that's here in the audience. But, all of you that are teenagers or looking at being teenagers, I really want you to keep this in mind as you're moving forward. I was a kid too, just like you, all of us were. We've all made mistakes or whatnot. But I want you to think about this. When you're listening to your buddies telling you, oh, this stuff won't hurt you. If you get in trouble, it's just a little trouble. You're a kid, it won't follow you. That's not true. That is absolutely not true. I had MIPs and nothing like really bad. I wasn't really a bad kid. It was just, it seemed like every time I had a beer in my hand, the law knew where we were. We were a small town. Of course they knew where we were. There's only 5 places to go party. They knew all 5 of them.
Yeah.
And so I ended up having a few of these things that seemed pretty minor, yet it almost prevented me from joining the military, which was my whole life plan. I planned on going to high school, graduating, going into the military, and being a soldier the rest of my life. It looked good. My grandfather made it look good, and even though my dad didn't retire from the military, he loved his service. And I didn't have a plan other than that. And I went down and I started talking to the recruiters. I went into the Army recruiter. He got me signed up. Well, that night I went home to tell my family and I got a DUI. And I had one beer, but it was enough. So for all of you kids, remember this. There are consequences for your actions. No matter how insignificant you think it is, it could turn into something bad. But we all know that God doesn't do bad things, and he can turn bad things into good things.
Yeah.
But try to make good decisions growing up so that way you have a bright future ahead of you. You want all of God's blessings, please.
Yeah. So at this point, you're turned down for military service, and this is what you'd said you'd been thinking about, and you just expected. This is what my life's going to look like. So at this point, your life takes a turn that you didn't expect. What does your life look like for the next few years?
Well, after that, like a lot of young men and women, I just decided to go to work and start living and doing something. But I didn't really have any goals. I didn't have a lot of desire. I thought about school, started school, wasn't a good situation. Just a lot of challenges. But about the time when 9/11 happened, I was growing. I was starting to grow as an individual. I had a family, looking at, my daughter was about to be born. And I had a good career. I was a land surveyor. The land surveying was a really great job because I went out on beautiful tracts of land and was marking points. We rode 4-wheelers. We had cool gear. It was a great job for a guy like me. And but on 9/11, 2001, we got this call to investigate. On 9/11, 2001, we were out there on a big track doing this land surveying, and it was the first day for me to run my own crew. And so I was all, really proud. We got out there and we couldn't get the satellites to work. We couldn't get our cell phones to work. We couldn't get anything to work. And, so we had to load everything up, head back to town. And as we come back into my boss's office, I was, humbled, obviously, because I was hoping I still have a job by the end of the day. And we get in there, and I see, the Twin Towers, and one of them smoking. And then about that time, there's this other plane coming in. And he's just watching it so intently. He's just laser focused. I didn't know what was going on. This is before smartphones, and nothing was working where we were. So we come into this thing dark. And then all of a sudden, I said, what's going on? And he looked at me and he said, Shilo, he said, we're under attack. And I was like, what do you mean? And about that time, we saw that second plane come in, and it hit the second tower. And I was just thinking, I got to do something. And I knew in that moment that I was going to do something, and even though I didn't know if I could join the military, I'd got denied before, but now we're at a time of war. I was just hoping. And I was going to go door to door until somebody took me. I went to the Air Force recruiter first, and he kind of laughed me out of the office, no joke. Because I had a buddy of mine that was Air Force, and he was like, yeah, I'll go down and walk in. And we were in a college town, and of course the recruiter was like, I didn't think 27 was old, but apparently he saw it coming. He was like, no, man, we can't use you. You're too old. And then, of course, the thing's on my record. And I was a little disgruntled, but like I said, I was just going to keep going. Well, I come out of the Air Force recruiting office, and the Army recruiter's literally waiting on me. He's like leaned up against the wall. He's like, what's up? And I was like, you waiting on me? And he was like, yeah. I said, all right, let's do it. I knew what I was getting into.
Yeah.
As I said, family of veterans, now we're at a time of war. I wanted combat boots and a rifle. That's just who I am. And I wanted to be on the ground. So I joined the Combat MOS and headed off.
So you, initially, you're not deployed to Iraq initially, but you end up in Iraq. And tell us about the experience. What were you doing in Iraq? What was your team doing?
In Iraq, on both deployments. Well, my job was a cavalry scout, reconnaissance, that sort of thing. And so, we were combat armed, but a lot of times what we were doing is like our whole job, everybody's job, the entire time that we were in Iraq is route clearance. I mean, everybody's job, because IEDs were our greatest threat. Mm-hmm. Yet, our job by description is going out, surveying areas, looking, how many enemies in the area, what's the best way to come into the city, whatever, We're looking for all these different dynamics that, to make it easier for us on the battlefield, do an assessment, and then sometimes, yes, we would have to engage the enemy, and that sort of thing. But, it was a great experience for me because I grew up on those stories. Kicking in and arresting the bad guys was kind of cool. Mm-hmm. Yet, at the end of the day, when those bullets were flying, we'd get back to our room, and I'd see that mural and those things that were important to me, and the reasons why I joined the military taught me a lot about mortality. There were so many near misses that we had in those first couple of years, both deployments, first deployment and the second deployment. It was just those moments where you're like, thank you, Lord. Thank you, I'm glad to be alive.
Yeah. So during your second deployment, tell us about February 19th, 2007.
February 19th, 2007, we were down in south of Baghdad, around Yusufia, Mahmadiyah. A lot of people know it as the Sunni Triangle. It's very volatile, big Saddam loyalist area. And for all of us, it was tough. All the roads were named after heavy metal bands, rightfully so. There was that many IEDs out there. It was tough. It was really tough. And almost every day, if it wasn't every day, it was almost every day, there was an IED went off in our area. And it was by far the most volatile area I had seen, in both the deployment. And that first deployment, we were all over the place.
If you don't mind, for the people that maybe aren't familiar with IED, what's an IED? IED, improvised explosive device. That means it can literally be anything that explodes. And of course, roadside bombs was one of our biggest challenges. Yet it could be anything. It could be a soda can on the side of the road filled with C4, or another vehicle, which happens sometimes, we would have to be extremely vigilant all the time because as we adapted to find them or prevent them, they adapted to hide them and trigger them. It was just this vicious cycle. So IEDs were our greatest threat. In fact, February 19, 2007, we got a call to investigate a possible IED in our area. Generally, what that means is we got to get there as quickly but as safely as possible to secure the site. As we were driving over there, I was the third truck in the convoy. My Humvee literally erupted. 3 of the 4 Humvee doors were blown off, and the entire top of the truck was blown off. And sadly, I lost 3 friends that day. America lost 3 of her children. I don't remember a lot from the initial blast, but eventually I woke up and was able to kick myself out of the Humvee. Yeah, so describe just the chaos, just what was going through your mind, what happened in that moment? Like, what were you seeing, what were you feeling?
Yeah, I was really dazed, obviously. I was really dazed. I was knocked unconscious for a few moments. And during that time, while I was unconscious, they came and retrieved the driver because they knew he was ambulatory. They knew he was able to get out of the truck. And it was, I guess you could say, a bit of triage because they thought I was dead because I was unconscious. And I'm sure the way I looked, I'm sure I looked like a mess. Yet, while I was there, they're tending to him. Eventually, I woke up and I started trying to kick myself out of the Humvee. And as I was pushing on my door, the only door left on the Humvee, I remember this arm just feeling funny, and I look over and my skin, the uniform was like melted into my skin. And I was thinking that's gotta hurt, but it wasn't hurting. So I went ahead and got out of the Humvee. And as an NCO, I started barking orders. I'm looking at everybody just running around. It seemed a little chaotic. Well, I'm gonna start trying to bring some organization. I'm like, hey, who's calling up the 9 line? Who's pulling security over there? Hey, y'all keep taking care of Adam. everybody just stops. And they're staring at me. And I'm sure because of the way I looked, there's a lot for me to take in. And even me, when I'm talking about taking it in and what I was seeing, it was like I was looking through straws, a tunnel vision kind of. So I knew I had taken a hit, but I didn't know how bad injured I was yet at this time. I seen one of my buddies over there at the other vehicles that had already passed the site. Remember, I was the third truck, so there's 2 trucks in front of me. And then one of my buddies was waving at me, and he's trying to get me to come to him. I could see his mouth moving, but I wasn't hearing anything. All of a sudden, my attention got redirected over here. I looked down to see what it was, and my leg was burning. Well, flames licked me in the face. I turned away, took my body armor off, because I knew I had to get the body armor off because the material was on fire and melting and running down my leg, and that was what was burning me. Well, when I got the body armor on the ground, I put the fire out, and I looked, and then all of this, I believe, was just so many divine moments. Like, I shouldn't have been able to kick myself out of the truck. I survived 1 blast, and then, what I forgot to mention a minute ago is I survived 2 blasts. One of the reasons that everybody was so shocked to see me standing outside of the truck is because while I was unconscious inside the truck, there was a secondary blast. Our AT-4, or the handheld rocket, cooked off and caused a bigger fireball and injured me even more. But my door, the only door, is probably what saved my life. For whatever reason, at least that's what they suspected. And so there I was, barking orders, I had to take my body armor off. And then my buddy that was trying to get my attention, he seen that I had taken my body armor off and I was completely exposed. And he ran out there and I didn't see him come around, but I turned back around to see what he wanted and he just grabbed me. And it was like we almost collided, like we hit. And when our bodies connected, my ears popped for the first time. And I heard this pop and a zing. Pop and a zing. Bullets were flying all around me. And I didn't know it at the time, but these were all the bullets that were inside my truck. 240 rounds, 50 cal rounds, big bullets, and boxes of them. Now think about that for a minute. This young man, and he was a young man. This young man, he ran out there in a hail of bullets for me, for his friend, for a comrade. But that's the kind of men and women that we have serving in our military right now. Yeah. That's the kind of men and women that we've had serving in our military over the years. The men and women that are willing to sacrifice and run towards the danger, not just for people that they care about, but for strangers as well. So please keep that in mind when you're saying thank you to the veterans in this audience. We have heroes right here in this room. Yeah. And as I said, it's bittersweet because for us that have served in uniform, those that we lost, like my 3 friends that didn't make it through the explosion, those are what we consider America's truest and greatest heroes. Yeah. They gave everything. Yeah. And so, I get over there, we start CLS, helicopter comes in. Everything's just boom, boom, boom. It happens the way it should be, And that's why I said there's a lot of divine intervention, I feel like, in the...
So at this point, you still don't know. There's a lot you don't know. You don't know that you lost 3 of your buddies. You don't know that yet. You don't even know how bad your condition is. So how did you become aware of that?
It was a process, as you can imagine. This whole thing was a process. Looking back, it was almost like slow motion. And then at the same time, it all seems like it might have happened that fast too. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just so, I don't know, euphoric, I guess, in a way, almost dreamlike. Sometimes I feel like, am I gonna wake up and then I'm back on the battlefield? It's like, oh, this was all just a bad dream. But I can tell you, I got past a lot of those dark days, and I'm on to such brighter days now. The whole process of, finding out, where my guys were. And of course, I'd been asking. And it's either nobody knew or nobody would tell me. Plus, at the same time, I got to figure out myself, too. Here I am. I'm laying on the battlefield, no weapon. I'm exposed, and now I'm starting to ache and feel everything. And it was just, a bit overwhelming. Well, my roommate, he comes over, and he's checking on me. And he was the acting platoon sergeant that day. Man, he's my buddy, right? So I'm joking with him. And as I've mentioned many times, veterans have a dark sense of humor. I'm trying to process everything. And now I'm trying to make a little light so I can process this better. And I said, hey, man, they're not going to make me pay for that Humvee, right? Because I don't make a lot of money nowadays. There's a lot of equipment in there. Some of it's pretty expensive. But jokingly, of course. And anyway, he chuckles a minute. But as we're doing this interaction, he leans in on me And like I said, it's uncomfortable. I feel very vulnerable. And then all of a sudden, I get a glimpse of my reflection in his glasses. I could see that my face was charred black, my hair was gone, my nose was gone, my ears were gone. I had blood running out of everything, and I was thinking, that can't be me. You know, I mean, this is like something out of a horror film. And I'm like, no way. And I'm like, dear God, please. I start panicking. You know, I'm starting to go into shock. And for those of you that don't know, shock can kill you. It can hurt you really bad, you know, if you don't get it under control. They started pushing him away because they could see whatever interaction was happening was causing me to get stressed. And then as they were working on me, I started trying to calm myself down. I'm like, okay, you know, self-assessment. This is probably where my age played a role. You know, joining at 27 might have sounded crazy, but I was pretty fit, worked out really good for me. 32, I'm on the battlefield. My age may have played a factor in this because I was able to calm myself down. And I now, you know, okay, now I'm processed. You know, I'm like, okay, well, this is pretty bad, you know. And I remember looking at this hand, and I was thinking, it was a selfish thought, no joke, but I was really thinking, I was like, I better get a day off for this. You know, you don't get a lot of days off in combat. 365, baby. Yeah. But they did give me a few days off, just so you know. Just so you know. Yeah. Yeah, it was a process. And through the whole thing, I'd been asking, where's my friends? Yeah. Where's my soldiers? Where's my friends? Where's my soldiers? Nobody knew, or nobody would tell me. One or the other, or maybe both. I'm in the hospital. We're going to separate ORs. Adam's in one, and I'm in the other. And of course, he's the same way. He's like, where's everybody at? And I'm like, I don't know. You know, we're kind of panicky about that. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just hope that they're back there with everybody. Everything's fine. I remember asking one more time. There's this doctor standing up above me. And he's like the only dude that made eye contact with me. You know, and I'm a personable person. So that's another thing that was kind of freaking me out. Everybody's like, you know, got all this anxiety in their voices like, you're going to be okay. You know, and in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, I know. You know, I'll just wear a few Band-Aids, a couple of Motrin, I'll be good, you know. Well, he looks down at me, and he makes eye contact, like perfect eye contact. I'll never forget it. I'm almost positive his eyes were green, even to this day. And he said, you'll find out in a couple of months where your friends are. I had no idea what that meant. But in that moment, about that moment, I was medically induced in a coma that I spent about 48 or so days in. Yeah. And I say that loosely, of course, because I don't know what the day one was.
Yeah. So you spent 48 days in a coma, and all of that wasn't, you know, we think a stereotypical kind of coma where you're just laying still and lifeless, but there were moments of lucidity. You were in and out, and you were heavily drugged. I mean, all kinds of things. And they were, in the midst of this, they were treating you with skin grafts and treatments, and I mean, there was so much going on, and really, part of the reason they were doing that is to keep the brain swelling down and to try to help your body recover from these catastrophic wounds. Because at this point, according to the book, it said that there was about a 2% chance for your survival at that point. So people weren't really counting on you being able to survive, but God sustained you through that. You made it through. So tell me about the day that you're in the hospital and your buddies are there to visit, Adam's there to visit, and you guys are talking. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a great problem. You know, one thing, though, that we hadn't talked about is the coma. You know, a lot of people don't really think that the coma's much, but it is. It was really dark. It was very, very dark. And it was, I mean, I felt like I was somewhat awake throughout the process. You know, I could hear people's voices, and I want to say it was probably one of the most helpless feelings, you know, because I could hear them, but I couldn't communicate with them. And I'd be in so much pain for whatever reason, whether I was in a surgery or whatever. But one of the reasons that they medically induce you to a coma is because the pain and everything that has to be done in that initial, you know, couple of months is so intense that a lot of people can't, it's like there's not enough medication, basically. And so it's like, it's just easier to put people to sleep, let them sleep through it best they can, and then bring them out. And it was hell.
Yeah.
And I can tell you this, is when I came out of that coma, I didn't want any more of hell. I was like, you know what? Yeah, time to make some life changes because I knew I didn't want to be there anymore.
Yeah, and this is true for this specifically with the section on the coma, but there is so much detail and so much that we can't cover in our conversation today that you get into in your book, and that was part of it. it's hard to fathom for those of us that are just onlookers on your story, the depths of pain you had to experience, the physical pain initially, but then the emotional pain, the spirit, all the stuff you had to endure. And so it really is hard for us to fathom that. And one of the painful days you had was the day that Adam came to visit you. So yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, so Adam and one of my other buddies, in fact, the guy that was working on me, because our medic was killed on the battlefield. He was in my truck. And so the guy that was working on me, and like I said, a lot of divine moments, a lot of good things happen in that moment. You know, that's probably one of the reasons I'm here. You know, is because the guy was a paramedic. So anyway, so my buddy that's a paramedic and my driver are both in San Antonio, and they're able to come see me for the first time. Well, you know, they come in, and of course it's emotional. You know, Adam, he immediately starts crying and trying to take the blame. And, you know, and I'm like, bro, I was like, this isn't your fault. I was like, I mean, as far as blame, there's plenty to go around, I'm sure. I mean, I was the truck commander. I mean, if anything, it should be my fault, right? And he was like, yeah, but I was driving. And I'm like, yeah, but we had two vehicles in front of us. You know, it could have been any of them that could have seen it, or it could have been any of them that got hit.
Yeah.
So, you know, where's the blame? You can't place blame on situations like this. You know, all you can do is just accept and move on. Well, in this moment of, you know, I'm trying to be strong and stoic for my driver. Of course, I'm crying. I'm a hot mess. Hot mess. Anyway, so, you know, I'm sitting there and I'm trying to console him. And in that, I'm like, you know, I said, one of these days, all of us, you know, meaning everybody in the crew, I said, all of us will sit around and we'll have a beer one of these days and we'll talk about it. You know, we'll figure it out. You know, it'll be good. And then it's like that deer in the headlights. Now I can feel that awkwardness. And I'm like, okay. I was like, who didn't make it? And he said, we're all that's left, Shilo. We're the only ones that made it. And of course, I mean, what do you say? I didn't even know what to say, you know? Still don't, I guess. That was probably about the toughest.
Yeah.
Toughest of many. But, you know, before that, you know, I had to find so many moments. And, you know, and it was so jumbled up. And I tried to hang on to those moments. And, you know, I didn't even really know what I was faced with in this recovery. And obviously, that's part of it. That would be, I guess you could say, the emotional and the mental stuff. You know, but before that, I really just had these physical limitations. And I didn't even have a day one. But I have this cornerstone that I knew exactly what I was faced with. And that was the day that they came into my hospital room and they said, Sergeant Harris, we want you to take 10 steps. I was like, 10 steps? I was like, man, I'm a combat soldier. I'm going to own this hospital. You know, I was all cocky about it. You know, I do 25-mile ruck marches in the snow, backwards, you know? Yeah. You ever heard your grandparents say, like, I did it backwards too? I'm like, oh, really? That's cool. Can I want to do it now? But, yeah, I was all, you know, confident and ready to do it. And just getting out of bed was excruciating. I took 3 little shuffles. And when I say little, I mean like little shuffles. Yeah. And I was completely wiped out. I laid back down on that bed. And just like that moment, you know, I didn't even know what to say. I didn't know what to do. All I did was cry. I cried. I cried for 3 days until I had no more tears. Well, in this other moment, you know, I'm faced with this and I'm like, this is a mountain I can't climb. Mm-hmm. But with any of these big challenges that we face, sometimes our mind starts trying to play tricks on us. And, you know, we start saying negative things to ourselves. Bruce Lee says that if you say bad things, your body doesn't really know the difference. Whether it's out of anger or whether it's out of an emotional moment, whatever the case, your body and your mind hears that. And even you're saying it, and it reacts to those negative things. So when you're down or when you're facing a mountain, you need to try to fill your life with as much positive as possible. Yeah. Well, I went through about 3 or 4 days with this, you know, and I spent like 3 or 4 days crying. I cried until there were no more tears. And then it was just like, okay, well, I got to move on. Well, it was kind of the same thing with the other thing, but I think this helped set the stage for me to move on from that one. So maybe it was better that I did this first, you know, with the steps, because I remember thinking, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. It's too hard, too heavy, whatever. You know, it's too painful. And I started mentally crippling myself before I started the fight. This went on for a few days. Well, one day my mom come in and she was feeding me breakfast because I couldn't even use my hands. My arms were stuck out like this still. And she'd come in the mornings and feed me breakfast, rubbing my feet because that's all she could touch. Everything else was covered in bandages or wounds. And she kept telling me, you know, you really need to start doing the work. We need you to do this. We need your family. Your family needs you back. We need you to come back. And I'm like, I know. You know, and I was still kind of half-hearted about it. But when she left, my dad came in, and I could almost see him out in the hall like, you know, your turn, you know. And he comes in, and you know, my dad, he just stood there. His arms crossed, just staring right down at me so intently. And it was making me uncomfortable. I'm trying to act like he's not there. I'm watching TV or something, you know. And then finally, I mean, this went on. He drugged us out for a minute, right? I mean, like literally a whole minute. Think about that whole minute, your dad's just like staring at you. I was like, what is it? I was like, what is it? I know you got something. And he drug it out even further. And then all of a sudden he said, are you done, soldier? I was like, excuse me, sir? Are you done, soldier? And I knew it was such a small but powerful statement. I knew right then I was not done. But I had already convinced myself that I was ready to give up. But he changed my perspective with 4 words. And I knew right then, I was like, I am not done, sir. And he said, then get your ass up and start doing the work that you know you're supposed to do. He turned around and walked out of the room and left me with my thoughts. I'll tell you, I turned those 3 steps into 10, 20, and then so on. And then eventually, I made my way all the way to Burger King, downstairs. That's no joke. It really did happen, but a lot of people don't believe it because I was on 4 East. And it's like a step down from ICU. You're not supposed to walk around by yourself unless you're going to the restroom or whatever. And you know, and by now, I'm starting to walk around, and but I was dragging my IV with my thumb. I could just hook my thumb around it and drag it around. But it was real quiet. I go to the restroom and I come out and I'm like, what? You know, I'm looking down the hallway, it's all quiet. And like I said, I knew Burger King was down in the basement. I get all the way to I make it all the way to Burger King. Nobody says anything. I'm sure I look probably silly, you know, in my little burn outfit. I don't know, you know, probably, I didn't even know if there was a backside to it. But I make it all the way to Burger King. And then I'm trying to order this Whopper, and I know that little girl had to think I was crazy because I couldn't even use my hands, you know, I barely made it down there. And she was like, what are you gonna do with it, honey? And I was thinking, if I could just get it in front of me, I'll be like, you know. But yeah, I didn't get the Whopper that day, by the way. In fact, I got caught. There was a nurse come along. She's like, Sergeant Harris, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, crud, you know. Trying to hobble out of there, great speed of snail. But it has been a long process. But you know, when I found out that I lost my soldiers, when I found out that that mountain that I was faced with was going to be so hard and challenging, you know, I knew that it was going to be a long road, but it was a road worth traveling.
So for you though, it wasn't a linear journey where it was just like, oh well, every day is a little easier, and you know, there were steps forward and then 2 steps back, and there'd be days that were easier and then days that were harder. And so how did you connect the hard days, or how did you bridge the gap from the hard days to the good that God has brought into your life? How did you make it from there to where you are today? What was that? I mean, was there a trick? Was there something you told yourself? Was there a habit or routine? Like, how did you do that?
For one, there was a chaplain. Oh, he wasn't really a chaplain, excuse me. He was a counselor, and I think he did a bit of ministry on the side. And he would come into my hospital room and visit with me. Mm-hmm. We talked about the book of Job quite a bit, you know, talking about that loss, and then, you know, how God can, you know, bring prosperity, you know, if you stay true. And, you know, and I've always had people ask me, were you ever mad at God, you know, for him doing it? I was like, man, God didn't do this. I was like, God is love, you know. Mm-hmm. If it's not love, it ain't God. And so, you know, I never got mad at God, but yeah, there were things that I had to do, the things that I had to learn, you know, because there's like all new habits. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, like old Shilo is dead. I mean, the old Shilo is gone, literally. You know, this is me now, and, you know, and I had to learn this guy. I had to learn, you know, what my limitations were. I had to learn what my strengths were. And I've I guess you could say a self-study in a lot of ways. I had to find what worked for me. And one thing that I know is I try to fill my life with as many positive things as possible. And with that, and I've said this many times, is you got to look at your life sometimes like an aerial view. And you're looking at all the different dynamics in your life. What's good, what's really working, what can I change? But if you're having like something bad going on in your life, that might mean that there's a change for it. When I was growing up in a small town, I know that that's hard because I had a lot of friends, that would come see me that had bad habits still from when we were growing up. And, and it's like I never really wanted to say bye to my friends. But believe it or not, I had some of them that told me bye because they were like, you're moving on to better things. But, sometimes we have to make hard decisions in our lives to make sure that we stay on the right path that God wants us to stay on. I found peace in solitude. I found peace in counseling. Yeah, of course, talking to my pastor, talking to other faith leaders, talking to my friends. It's really important that you have a support network. And I can tell you, for any of you that might be having challenges right now, look around this room. Look at your pastor up here. This is your family. You are not alone.
Yeah.
And if you ever think you're alone, you definitely need to come back to church because I guarantee it, they'll wrap you up with love. Let them know that you need that love. I bet you would wrap them up. I know you would. That's why you got into what you're doing.
Yeah.
God called you to do it. He's a shepherd. You are not alone. And our mind plays tricks on us and tells us lies when we're in those dark places. So when you ever feel like you're in the dark, I really want you to ask yourself, am I done right now? Am I really alone? And I'm hoping that you will find the answers that you seek, because even though I didn't grow up with a, strong religious structure in my life, when I was younger, I knew God was always with me. I knew Jesus. And something I was telling Pastor Miller, he didn't know is, I went to a UIW during COVID since I'd lost a lot of work, because I wanted to, fill my time. I wanted to fill it up. But at the same time, I went for religious studies because I wanted to know the man that died for my sins. I wanted to know about religion. I wanted to understand myself. And it was so enlightening and so powerful. I feel like I understand myself better. I feel like I understand my faith better. And I feel like I understand my purpose better.
So we've been in a series called Win by Losing. And I love your story because it's clear today that you are winning, but it's also clear that, man, you have lost a lot, that you've laid some things down. You've lost friends. You've lost just some physical things. I mean, there's so much loss you've experienced, but in your life, when you look back, what would you say that you feel like God has awarded to you or you have won because in spite of your loss, maybe?
For one, after going through everything that I went through with the surgeries and learning how to walk again, learning how to talk again, I had a tracheotomy. I didn't know if I was going to be able to talk. Everything was like a whisper. Even if I felt like I was yelling, it was just a whisper. And so I pretty much had to retrain myself how to do everything. Mm-hmm. And I got to where everything was an opportunity to work out as well. So I realized how strong I was, but I had to rebuild all that, I guess you could say, superficial strength. But when I'm talking about strength, I'm talking about that real strength. It comes from down deep. The strength that you have right here, that will, that drive, what gets you up every day, what gets you out the door, what makes you want to come home. Whatever it is, that thing that drives you, those strengths, I feel like they're supercharged. And one thing I can say that I know that I've found is I feel like I found my salvation.
Yeah.
Because now I understand me. I've been through so much and all these sacrifices. You really do win in loss.
Yeah.
It's sad to say, but sometimes, getting rid of the old gives you an opportunity to come back stronger, better, learn new lessons, or, learn from the lessons that you learned the hard way, or were taught the hard way. I mean, there's so many layers to this cake.
Yeah.
Before I move on to the next thing here, or before you move on to the next thing, I want to tell you a story. Is that cool?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, all right. You hadn't heard this one yet.
Okay.
All right. So, I had a lot of dark days. It was hard. It was a long, hard challenge. Don't get me wrong, I'm a pretty happy guy. So, most people are like, how is that guy so dang happy? I'm like, I got a lot of blessings. I really do. And I count them often. But when I say I count these blessings, it's not just like counting them, like, oh yeah, I got that, I got this. I mean, I weigh it. Because it's like when you have a scale and you got this scale of good and bad that's going on in your life, you really want that weight of the good. You know, my family, I got a healthy, intelligent, good family, and I'm so proud of them. There's a lot of weight in that. My daughter, I special ordered her, and that's a conversation because I know Steph, she's pregnant. Y'all are having a daughter too, right? And her and her husband was telling me about it last night. And anyways, I special ordered my daughter. I really did. I knew exactly what I wanted. Now, out of 5 kids, I have 1 girl. So, but I remember she was really young going through all of this. She's 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old. She was having a hard time processing everything, and we didn't always fill her in on everything the way that we should. And we learned that late, of course, and we were like, we got to give them more information so they understand, because their imagination takes hold. I was going in for a surgery. She thought they were removing my arm. But what it was is they said that, you know, they had to do the surgery, otherwise I could lose my arm. And so she was like really worried about it. Well, when I found this out, you know, I was trying to spend a little time with her. Well, that same day I hit myself with a hammer because we'd been working on the house. And I hit myself with this hammer and it just tore the skin off that finger, and I was crying. I was crying. I don't know, all you tough guys, don't give me a hard time. You know, I mean, look at that. It was like, there was a lot going on, okay? But at the end, I hit myself with a hammer. So, you know, I got blood running everywhere. I started crying. Here comes my 5-year-old daughter. She's like, Daddy, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, you know. And anyway, she doctors me up. She does everything. You know, she's like 21 now. You know. Anyway, she does everything, right? Get out, we go outside, and we're laying on the trampoline, and we're talking, looking at the clouds and this and that. And she starts talking about heaven. My 5-year-old daughter. And she's like, Daddy, you know, blah, 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 questions this, guide that, and we're talking about castles and imagining what it's like going to be in heaven. And she looks at me and she said, Daddy, can we pray? And I swear, I promise, this is no lies at all. She asked me if we could pray, my 5-year-old daughter. And I said, yeah. I said, would you like to lead us? She prayed for everybody in our family. She prayed for me, she prayed for her mother. She even prayed for her brothers. You know, she don't always do that. She prayed for everybody in her family. But she didn't ask the Lord for one thing for herself. And I was thinking, if our family has that much love, and if my 5-year-old daughter is that selfless, we're on the right path and we're gonna be okay. Yeah, I knew we would be, because I knew God was with us, and I still do to this day.
Yeah.
I know that God is with me every step.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. I really do appreciate it. And here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna let Sergeant Harris go ahead and slip out. He's gonna be out in the lobby, and he's got some time when we finish here in just a few minutes that he'll be able to greet you and talk to you for a few minutes and, you know, take a picture or whatever it is before he has to get to the airport. But can we give him a round of applause and say thank you? Thank you. God bless you.
God bless you today.
Appreciate you.
Well, I'm going to take my ears and go.
You guys can be seated. I'm going to turn it over to our hosts in Blairsville. They're going to close out our time, give you a chance to respond. I love you guys. God bless you. So for those of you here in the room, and those of you watching online, what an incredible story. And really, there's only a fraction of the whole story. One of the things that he talks about more in the book that we didn't have a chance to talk about today was just the scars that he's got. And the reality is, all of us have been through pain. All of us have been through loss. All of us have had things in our lives that have scarred us. And one of the things Shilo said in an interview that I had listened to is he said, my scars have a story. And I think that's true for all of us. All of us have scars that have a story. Our scars tell a story about what we've been through and who we are. And the beautiful thing about Shilo's story is he was able to surrender all that to God, and now God is telling a really beautiful story through his scars. So I guess my question is, what kind of story is your scars telling? Are your scars telling a God story? Look at what I've survived, look what I've been through. Look at what God helped me through. Or are your scars telling a story about how hard your life is and how bad things are? And I don't want to make light of any of this, but Shilo had a choice to make. In fact, one of the things that we didn't mention in this conversation today, we talked about it a little last night. his chaplain, and it's recorded in the book, but his chaplain came to him one day and they were sitting together, and his chaplain asked him a question. He said, Shilo, you can't live in what if, you have to live in what now. And it's so easy to live in the what if moment. Well, what if that hadn't happened? And what if I hadn't experienced that pain? But God wants to move in our lives. He wants to speak in our lives. And what we have to say is, okay, what now? I can't change the past. I can't change what happened to me. I can't change what I did. But I can allow God to work in me from this moment forward. So I want to give you that opportunity. So if you would bow your head and close your eyes all over this place. Lord, I pray that you would minister in these last few moments that we have together. I pray that you would speak life into us. I pray that our hearts would be changed. I pray for those that have experienced deep hurt and pain. Maybe it looks different than what Sergeant Harris experienced, but God, we all carry hurt. We all carry loss. We all carry some scars. And so God, I pray today we would be willing to surrender those scars to you, that hurt to you, so that you can bring healing and wholeness to our hearts, so that you can tell the right story through the scars that we have today. So with your head bowed, your eyes closed, if you're here today and you'd say to me, Mel, I know I'm not really serving God. I know I'm not really in relationship with Jesus, but I want to be. I want to surrender my pain to him, and I want him to bring healing and wholeness. I want him to bring beauty from my ashes, and I believe he can. So today I want to surrender my life to Jesus. I'd love to pray for you, and if you want to be included in that prayer, would you put your hand up real high where I can see it, and you can put it right back down. Yeah, thank you, ma'am. I see you on my left. Thank you, sir. I see you back there. On my left, who else would say that's me? Pray for me today. Yeah, up in the balcony. I see you over there. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. I see you. Praise the Lord. Who else would say that's me today, Mel? Yeah, thank you. I see you, sir, on my right. Praise God. Thank you. A couple more seconds. Anyone else? Yeah, on my left. Thank you. Romans chapter 10, verse 9 says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. So we're going to pray a prayer together today. And this isn't my prayer. This is your prayer. This is your prayer from your heart to God. And I want to encourage you, you are praying this prayer today. These are my words, but this is your prayer. So pray this prayer with me today. Say, Heavenly Father, thank you for sending Jesus, your one and only Son, to pay the price for my sins on the cross. From now on, my life is yours. Use me for your glory. Take my scars and tell a beautiful story of your goodness and bring healing to my life. And let all of this be for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Come on, let's give God a round of applause. If you prayed that prayer and you meant it, whether you raised your hand or not, Scripture says you're a new creation, that the old is gone and the new has come. So we'd love to help you take that next step in your faith journey. If you're going on a journey, you got to know where to start. So let us help you start the right way. If you would take 60 seconds, fill out that card in the seat back in front of you. Let us know about the decision you made today, whether it's to surrender your life to Christ or rededicate your life to Christ. And then take that card when we're finished here in just a moment back to our next step table. It's right next to the table where Shilo is with his books. So stop by there. Let us know about the decision you made today. If you'd prefer, if you're watching online, you can simply text Summit PA, the number 94,000, and let us know about your decision that way. But even if you do that, if you're here in the room, would you please stop by and let us talk to you, let us visit with you for a minute so we can resource you and help you take the next step in your faith journey. Here's what's gonna happen right now. The worship team's gonna lead us in one final song. And while they're leading us, our prayer team's gonna come up and they'll be available on either side of this platform. And if you need prayer for any reason at all today, our team is here. We would love to pray with you before you leave today. So if you've got a need, please be bold enough to step out from your seat as we're singing this final song and let our team pray for you. And then in just a moment, the team will dismiss us and you'll be on your way. Sergeant Harris will be available for a few minutes. We would love for you to be able to stop by and visit with him. And please join us next week for baptisms. It really is going to be spectacular. So join us next weekend. Stand to your feet all over the room. Let's worship together one more time before we go today, guys. I love you all so very much, and I am so honored I get to be your pastor. God bless you. Have an awesome week, and we'll see you next weekend.